Hi guys, welcome back for the last chapter of A Wrinkle in Time. You've read the last 4 on your own. We hopefully had a chance to discuss them either in class or in Teams meetings, and you have a good understanding. We have another worksheet that goes along with chapter 12, and there are some notes that go along with it, and I'd like to wrap the book up with you as well. So let's take a look at your worksheet that can be found in Teams. And it does look just a little bit different again this time. So the heading is here, and I'd like you to make sure that you put your cursor after the name, type in your name, period, and then the date as well. So now we're going to take the time to fill in the notes for Climax. So we see here the highest point of blank, the blank point of the story. And when you go to type your answer in, you can simply highlight that underlined part and then type the answer to have that filled in. Before we fill that in, let's take a look. In your interactive notebook, all the way back to the beginning of the year, remember we made this plot structure pyramid. So isn't this crazy? We've read most of the book. Exposition was about the first 3 to 4 chapters. Right, the inciting incident pretty much occurred right at the beginning of chapter 4, end of chapter 3. The rest of the novel was the rising action. Remember I said that this box is not equal to this box? Now we're in the last chapter of the book, and we're going to get the climax, the falling action, and the resolution all in one chapter. I think it's even less than 20 pages. All right, so in your notebook, the definition that we have for climax, mine's written in yellow, so it's kind of hard to see. If you take a look at yours, it says something like the most exciting or intense part of the story for the protagonist. Protagonist would be Meg. Usually the turning point, and then also in there they call it the OMG, oh my goodness moment. This is amazing. I can't believe what's happening. I like the idea of the turning point as well, because it's when something changes for Meg or your main character. All the way along, Meg has been a particular way. Something is going to happen that's going to change for her. And then we're going to get into our turning point. So let's go into our notes again and figure out what goes in the blanks, because it's just a little bit different than what we have written in our notes. The highest point of, so we had said it was the most exciting or the most intense part. And what I would encourage you to put here is the highest point of interest. INTEREST, the highest point of interest. So highlight this and type in interest. The blank point of the story, and this is the part that I just talked about. I like this definition because it's the easiest way to pick it out, especially if it's not a very intense story, and that would be the turning point. TURNING, the turning point of the story when things begin to change. All right, we have 3 questions before we get to our next set of notes. So let's take a look. Chapter 12 is called The Foolish and the Weak. Question 1, describe Meg's internal conflict at the beginning of the chapter. How does she resolve this conflict? Okay, let's go back to our notebook again. All right, so right after we had done our plot structure, we then took notes on conflict. We talked about internal versus external conflict. Internal is a problem inside the mind, a decision, or heart. Okay, so we're looking at, we have a definition, takes place inside a character's mind or heart, sometimes involves a decision. What is the internal conflict, the decision that Meg is trying to make at the beginning of chapter 12? And as we read, if you stick with me, we'll discuss that. You'll simply need to type up your own answer that goes along with that. I would have you put your cursor right after where it says type your answer here. I'm going to remind you to make sure that you have, oh, I don't think I shared my screen. I think I just clicked on it. Give me just a second. Sorry about that. Okay, so now you can see it. Put your cursor right after it says type answer here. Remind you that you need a topic sentence. You need at least 2 text details that you explain. These are ACE answers. And I haven't shared this with you yet, so I'm going to add that in the directions. Okay. Question 2. What gift does each of the Mrs. W's give to Meg for her journey? How do you think these gifts will help her? So we're going to answer that before we get to the next set of notes. So just like before, when all 3 children went on a journey and received gifts, this time just Meg is going. What gifts does she receive from each of the Mrs. W's? And then the last question here, for the time being, identify the climax of the story. So we want to pick out what's that highest point of interest, what's the turning point for Meg, so pinpoint the turning point of the story, and how does this event cause the story to change? You're going to type your answer within here. And then we'll come back and we'll fill in the notes for resolution later on. So let's get to our book. Let's get to the end of the story. If you have the black book, you are on page 212. And if you have the yellow book, you are on page 192. Please find it. And here we go. Chapter 12, The Foolish and the Weak. Meg could see nothing, but she felt her heart pounding with hope. With one accord, all the beasts rose to their feet, turned toward one of the arched openings, and bowed their heads and tentacles in greeting. Mrs. Whatsit appeared, standing between 2 columns. Beside her came Mrs. Who, behind them a quivering of light. The 3 of them were somehow not quite the same as they had been when Meg had first seen them. Their outlines seemed blurred. Colors ran together as in a wet watercolor painting. But they were there. They were recognizable. They were themselves. Meg pulled herself away from Aunt Beast, jumped to the floor, and rushed at Mrs. Whatsit. But Mrs. Whatsit held up a warning hand, and Meg realized that she was not completely materialized, that she was light and not substance. And embracing her now would have been like trying to hug a sunbeam. We had to hurry, so there wasn't quite time. You wanted us? Mrs. Whatsit asked. The tallest of the beasts bowed again and took a step away from the table and towards Mrs. Whatsit. It is a question of the little boy. Father left him, Meg cried. He left him on Camazotz. Appallingly, Mrs. Whatsit's voice was cold. And what do you expect us to do? Meg pressed her knuckles against her teeth so that her braces cut her skin. Then she flung out her arms pleadingly. But it's Charles Wallace. It has him, Mrs. Whatsit. Save him, please save him. You know that we can do nothing on Camazotz, Mrs. Whatsit said, her voice still cold. You mean you'll let Charles be caught by it forever? Meg's voice rose shrilly. Did I say that? But we can't do anything. You know we can't. We tried, Mrs. Whatsit. You have to save him. Meg, this is not our way, Mrs. Whatsit said sadly. I thought you would know that this is not our way. Mr. Murray took a step forward and bowed. And to Meg's amazement, the 3 ladies bowed back to him. I don't believe we've been introduced, Mrs. Whatsit said. It's Father. You know it's Father. Meg's angry impatience grew. Father, Mrs. Whatsit, Mrs. Who, and Mrs. Which. I'm very glad to, Mr. Murray mumbled, then went on. I'm sorry, my glasses are broken and I can't see you very well. It's not necessary to see us, Mrs. Whatsit said. If you could teach me enough more about the Tesseract so that I could get back to Camazotz. What then? Came Mrs. Witch's surprising voice. I will try to take my child away from it. And you know that you will not succeed. There's nothing left except to try. Mrs. Whatsit spoke gently. I'm sorry. We cannot allow you to go. Then let me, Calvin suggested. I almost got him away before. Mrs. Wetzel shook her head. No, Calvin. Charles has gone even deeper into it. You will not be permitted to throw yourself in with him. For that, you must realize, is what would happen. There was a long silence. All the soft rays filtering into the great hall seemed to concentrate on Mrs. Wetzel, Mrs. Who, and the faint light that must be Mrs. Which. No one spoke. One of the beasts moved a tendril slowly back and forth across the stone tabletop. At last, Meg could stand it no longer, and she cried out despairingly, "Then what are you going to do? Are you just going to throw Charles away?" Mrs. Witch's voice rolled formidably across the hall. "Silence, child." But Meg could not be silent. She pressed closely against Aunt Beast, but Aunt Beast did not put the protecting tentacles around her. "I can't go," Meg cried. "I can't. You know I can't." "Did anybody ask you to?" The grim voice made Meg's skin prickle into goose flesh. She burst into tears. She started beating at Aunt Beast like a small child having a tantrum. Her tears rained down her face and spattered Aunt Beast's fur. Aunt Beast stood quietly against the assault. "All right, I'll go," Meg sobbed. "I know you want me to go." "We want nothing from you that you do without grace," Mrs. Wetzel said, "or that you do without understanding." Meg's tears stopped as abruptly as they had started. "But I do understand." She felt tired and unexpectedly peaceful. Now the coldness that under Aunt Beast's ministrations had left her body had also left her mind. She looked toward her father, and her confused anger was gone, and she felt only love and pride. She smiled at him, asking forgiveness, and then pressed up against Aunt Beast. This time, Aunt Beast's arm went around her. Mrs. Witch's voice was grave. "What do you understand?" "That it has to be me. It can't be anyone else. I don't understand Charles, but he understands me. I'm the one who's closest to him. Father's been away for so long, since Charles Wallace was a baby. They don't know each other. And Calvin's only known Charles for such a little time. If it had been longer, then he would have been the one. But oh, I see, I understand. It has to be me. There isn't anyone else." We are starting to get into the answer. We already had some of it before. What is the internal conflict that Meg's struggling with? So she had been struggling with this idea that Charles was left behind and who was going to save him. But really, she's struggling to come to terms with the fact that it's got to be her. She has to be the one to go back to Camazotz, and she's going to have to go alone. And that's a tough decision to make. And they're going to go through more of the reasons why. Mr. Murray, who had been sitting, his elbows on his knees, his chin on his fists, rose. "I will not allow it." "Why?" Mrs. Witch demanded. "Look, I don't know what or who you are, and at this point, I don't care. I will not allow my daughter to go alone into this danger." "Why?" "You know what the outcome will probably be, and she's weak. Now weaker than she was before. She was almost killed by the black thing. I fail to understand how you can even consider such a thing." Calvin jumped down. "Maybe it's right about you, or maybe you're in league with it. I'm the one to go if anybody goes. Why did you bring me along at all? To take care of Meg. You said so yourself." "But you have done that," Mrs. Wetzel assured him. "I haven't done anything," Calvin shouted. "You can't send Meg. I won't allow it. I'll put my foot down. I won't permit it." "Don't you see that you're making something that is already hard for Meg even harder?" Mrs. Whatsit asked him. Aunt Beast turned her tentacles toward Mrs. Whatsit. Is she strong enough to test her again? You know what she has been through. If Mrs. Witch takes her, she can manage, Mrs. Whatsit said. If it will help, I could go too and hold her. Aunt Beast's arm around Meg tightened. Oh, Aunt Beast, Meg started, but Mrs. Whatsit cut her off. No, I was afraid not, Aunt Beast said humbly. I just wanted you to know that I would. Mrs. Whatsit? Mr. Murray frowned and pushed his hair back from his face. Then he shoved with his middle finger at his nose as though he were trying to get his spectacles closer to his eyes. Are you remembering that she is only a child? And she's backward, Kelvin bellowed. I resent that, Meg said hotly, hoping that indignation would control her trembling. I'm better than you at math, and you know it. Do you have the courage to go alone? Mrs. Whatsit asked her. Meg's voice was flat. No, but it doesn't matter. She turned to her father and Kelvin. You know it's the only thing to do. You know they'd never send me alone if... How do we know they're not in league with it? Mr. Murray demanded. Father. No, Meg, Mrs. Whatsit said. I do not blame your father for being angry and suspicious and frightened. And I cannot pretend that we are doing anything but sending you into the gravest kind of danger. I have to acknowledge quite openly that it may be a fatal danger. What does the word fatal mean? Deadly. They could send her there and she could possibly die. I know this, but I do not believe it. And the happy medium doesn't believe it either. Can't she see what's going to happen? Kelvin asked. Oh, not in this kind of thing. Mrs. Whatsit sounded surprised at his question. If we knew ahead of time what was going to happen, we'd be like the people on Camazotz, with no lives of our own, with everything all planned and done for us. How can I explain it to you? Oh, I know. In your language, you have a form of poetry called the sonnet. We're not going to study it right now, but we are going to get to poetry, and we're going to learn sonnets, so make sure you pay attention. Yes, Kelvin said impatiently. What's that got to do with the happy medium? Kindly pay me the courtesy of listening to me. Mrs. Whatsit's voice was stern, and for a moment, Kelvin stopped pawing the ground like a nervous colt. It is a very strict form of poetry, is it not? Yes. There are 14 lines, I believe, all in iambic pentameter. That's a very strict rhythm or meter, yes? Yes, Kelvin nodded. And each line has to end with a rigid rhyme pattern. And if the poet does not do it exactly this way, it is not a sonnet, is it? No. But within this strict form, the poet has complete freedom to say whatever he wants, doesn't he? Yes, Kelvin nodded. So, Mrs. Whatsit said. So what? Oh, do not be stupid, boy, Mrs. Whatsit scolded. You know perfectly well what I am driving at. You mean you're comparing our lives to a sonnet? A strict form, but freedom within it? Yes, Mrs. Whatsit said. You're given the form, but you have to write the sonnet yourself. What you say is completely up to you. Please, Meg said, please, if I've got to go, I want to go and get it over with. Each minute you put it off makes it harder. She is right, boomed Mrs. Witch's voice. It is time. All right, I'm going to pause right here. And what I'm going to have you do once I finish explaining this is I want you to also hit pause. So what I would like you to do is answer the first question, go back over the last few pages to type in your answer for the internal conflict. Describe Meg's internal conflict at the beginning of the chapter. How does she resolve this conflict? So at the beginning, remember what she's struggling with. What does she finally decide? Okay, make sure you touch on what are the things that are bothering her. Those should be your two details. So answer what the internal conflict is, the 2 details of what's really bothering her, what's the decision that she has to make, why is it a hard decision, and then how is it resolved at the end of your answer. When you're done typing that answer, please come right back to the video. We only have about 4 minutes left, and I have a special assignment that I want to give you that in order to earn credit for it, you have to watch this video and learn how to do it. So hit pause and come back. Okay, special assignment. Interactive notebook. Hopefully you know where yours is. You need to track it down and find it if you don't know where it is. We are going to our conflict page. And remember, we have another page that we have written nothing on yet. I would like you to identify several examples of conflict. I'm actually going to have you go back. So internal conflict, you can use the one that we just did on your note paper if you wish. And I'd like you to try to come up with one more internal conflict, one more difficult decision for any character. You decide which character it might be. We know the most about Meg, but we do have some information about the other characters. When you get to the external conflict, I want you to identify the 3 different kinds of external conflict. So on that next page, we have, so man versus self was internal. We have man versus man. What examples do we have in the book that are 2 characters against each other? Make sure you explain it. Man versus nature. One might be a little bit trickier, but remember that nature, and of course I don't have my notes written underneath here, but nature includes the more than just the weather and animals. Check your notes because there's something else in there that will be helpful. And then our last one is man versus society. Okay, so try to come up with an example, and then remember that society includes multiple things as well. Please, your notes should be filled in. You know what those examples are. That's going to help you find them in the book. So you're going to have 5 things written on this page. You have 2 examples of internal conflict. Perhaps write them in pencil. You can put them on here. You can grab a Post-it note and stick them on there if you wish, or go continue down on the lines. And then you need at least 3 examples of external conflict, and try to have the 3 different kinds. When you are finished with this, you need to take a picture of it. You can use your computer, put it right up to your screen, click the picture, add it to this assignment for chapter 12. Or if you have your phone and you're able to add it that way. So this will be part of your chapter 12 grade. So make sure that you take a picture of your internal and your external conflict examples. All right, I'm going to wrap it up there for this lesson. And when we come back, we'll continue to read. We'll find out what those gifts are that Meg receives from Mrs. W's before she goes on her trip. See you soon.